Welcome back, everybody. Eric here. All right, we are going to get right into today's video. You guys probably know that just a few days ago, President Biden issued an executive order related to firearms, and anything in the Second Amendment community that's related to executive orders, it can always get slippery. So we always want to kind of talk about it and get some of our thoughts out about it because, it just seems like every time we turn around, they are trying to pass some crap. They're trying to have some trick up their sleeve. They're trying to use some little bit of power they have to exact their will against us without representation. None of this is going through Congress. This is just the president swiping a pen. It was none other than Biden himself that said that only tyrants use a pen to pass laws, to executive orders. So here he is being a tyrant. So honestly, in the big scheme of things, this is probably lip service, but I am going to provide a few little points, and I don't want this video to be stupid long. There are some bullet points that the whitehouse.gov page lays out in the fact sheet. So I'm just going to quickly go down some of the bullet points here related to the executive orders and give some of my thoughts as we go. So let's get right into it. President Biden announces new actions to reduce gun violence and make our communities safer. Today in Monterey Park, California, President Biden will announce an executive order with the goal of increasing the number of background checks conducted before firearms sales, moving the U.S. as close to universal background checks as possible without additional legislation. The executive order will also keep more guns out of dangerous hands by increasing the effective use of red flag laws, strengthening efforts to hold the gun industry accountable, and accelerate law enforcement efforts to identify and apprehend the shooters menacing our communities. Yeah, I'd like to see y'all go down to Chirac and take a gander around and see what happens to you. But y'all knock yourselves out. President Biden is also encouraging the Federal Trade Commission to issue a public report analyzing how gun manufacturers market firearms to minors. Of course, I will link this in the description box below, and you can read all of this on your own. I'm not going to bore you with all of the word salad that's in here because it kind of dances around. We'll just get right to the point. Increase the number of background checks by ensuring that all background checks required by law are conducted before firearms purchases, moving the U.S. as close to universal background checks as possible without additional legislation. So the issue is there's a lot of false determinations that come back from background checks as well. It's a flawed background check system for one, okay? 9 out of 10 times, there's some type of issue if you are given a denial for a gun purchase. A lot of times, there's tons of flaws in it. And there's a lot of flaws that are related to the other direction too, where someone who isn't supposed to buy a gun is allowed to buy a gun anyway. So there's a lot of people that fall through the cracks in the background check system. So it's not a perfect background check system. And the thing is too, revocations of FFLs are way up, like at an astronomical rate. Right now, the Biden administration has a zero tolerance type policy related to FFLs and minor paperwork errors. So you're talking someone, we're all human, right? Someone forgets to dot an I or cross a T or something like that. They're saying that they will shut down your FFL for that. And when it seems like, we found out last year that the ATF is collecting information of firearms owners and all of their gun records and putting them into a database. Now, it's not a registry though. It's a database, a searchable database. I don't care what you say. That's a registry. They're not allowed to maintain a registry. You would think that if there was some far-reaching dragnet operation to collect as much information about gun owners as possible, you think it would be in their best interest to ignore minor paperwork errors and take every bit of data that they can get in hand that they possibly can get. So why would they be shutting down FFLs if their goal was to collect all of that data? I mean, wouldn't they want more data? It just seems a little counterintuitive to me. Now, and it sucks too to think that you're some mom and pop gun shop that is trying to make a living and doing the best you can. And everything that you're doing with your business is in good due diligence. You're doing everything in good faith. You're doing everything to the best of your ability. You're trying to be as careful as possible. And just because you made some little tiny paperwork error, they're going to shut you down completely. whereby the FBI and the NICS system with background checks makes tons of errors, tons of false proceeds, tons of false denials, and yet there's no accountability for them. It's just lip service, just like this executive order is lip service. They cannot physically require more background checks. You know what I mean? That there's nothing within the current way that the law reads and that the way that things are handled right now with background checks that make them able to make any more background checks than what they already do. If you go to a gun store, you're going to do a background check. If you're at a gun show and you buy a gun from a dealer, you're going to do a background check. And there's nothing about this executive order that will change that fact. That is a fact, and nothing will change in that regard. Improve public awareness and increase appropriate use of extreme risk protection, red flag orders, and safe storage of firearms. Like basically, they want more red flag confiscations. Now, red flag laws, again, we've mentioned this in many, many videos before. I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but they're very dangerous, okay? Because they put not only civilians, but also law enforcement at a lot of risk. There's been a lot of police that have been shot at and physically shot by gun owners who, they're trying to kick in their door. And to be fair, try to look at this from this perspective, right? You're Joe Blow asleep in your bed in the middle of the night. You don't know that there's some red flag confiscation order that's been passed down on you. And someone kicks in your door in the middle of the night at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, you're going to defend yourself. It's just a natural conditioned response to want to defend yourself against someone who's breaking in your home. You're not going to hear them say police. You're not going to really know it's the police. Like, there's a lot of people that just have that conditioned response. And to think that, most times in a red flag confiscation order that does involve some exchange of gunfire between the accused, which you're not even convicted of a crime, you're accused of something, and they're taking your firearms preemptively just because you're accused of something, and you can't face your accuser. You don't know who's accusing you. It could be someone that you barely know that just wants to ruin your life and make things hard on you, or maybe they know you're a gun owner and they just want to give you a hard time. There's a danger in that, allowing some phantom court to just issue a warrant to take your guns away. That's a very scary environment. And it's important to mention that there's been a ton of federal money funneled down to various states to basically support their red flag confiscation efforts. In fact, even here in the state of Georgia, where I live, there's been I forget how much money. I want to say it was like $19 million or something like that. That was given to the state of Georgia to support their red flag confiscation efforts or whatever. Like, they're giving state money out to all the states who I guess agree to have some sort of a red flag program. But I wonder just how much teeth that really has with the states. If the states are like, oh yeah, we have a red flag confiscation program. Yeah, send us that $19 million. Hey, Bobby, do we have a red flag confiscation program? Nah, Tom, we don't. Okay, whatever. Just put it in the account. Let's pretend it doesn't exist. So whether or not any of those funds have actually come to any real fruition to getting anything done on the red flag front on the states that have taken the money, that remains to be seen. Now, there are some states that obviously do have strict red flag confiscation laws in place. There's about 19 states or so that have already red flag laws on the books. But I think there are some states that don't have red flag laws on the books, but have still taken the government money. And the question remains how that's going to pan out. Address the loss or theft of firearms during shipping. The ATF data indicates an over 250% increase in the number of firearms reported as lost or stolen during shipment between federally licensed firearms dealers from roughly 1,700 in 2018 to more than 6,100 in 2022. President Biden is directing the Secretary of Transportation in consultation with the Department of Justice to work to reduce the loss or theft of firearms during shipment and to improve reporting of such losses or thefts, including by engaging with carriers and shippers. That's not a bad idea. Of course, we need to make sure guns don't get stolen, especially by the freaking carriers. I think you might want to ask the carriers. It's a pretty well-known fact, right? At this point, far along enough in the process now, we know the carriers are the ones lifting the guns, okay? Now, is that to say, a vehicle gets broken down on the side of the road and someone breaks into it and steals everything and there happen to be a few firearms in there? I'm sure there's some isolated incidents like that where it occurs, but I'd be willing to bet with a relatively high degree of authority that it's more than likely that these guns are getting lifted by employees. Figure that out and you'll figure out the problem. Provide the public and policymakers with more information regarding federally licensed dealers who are violating the law. Gun dealers violating federal law put us all at risk by increasing the likelihood that firearms will fall into dangerous hands. The president is directing the Attorney General to publicly release, to the fullest extent permissible by law, ATF records from the inspection of dealers cited for violation of federal firearms laws. This information will empower the public and policymakers to better understand the problem and then improve our laws to hold rogue gun dealers accountable. Now, here's the thing. Biden is trying to chalk up the rogue gun dealer idea with the same group of people that is like, we're going to revocate this. We're going to take this FFL away because they forgot to cross an I or dot a T. Or dot an I or cross a T. See, I just did it. I get my FFL taken away. See, I did it. But the point is, they're trying to say that the person that fails to dot an I or cross a T is the same person that is a rogue gun dealer. And here's the thing, like in popular culture and popular media and movies and things like that, we're always led to believe that there's the guy at the surplus store that has the button behind the counter that he can push and the wall will slide down and reveal a bunch of rocket launchers and grenades and machine guns and illegal guns that people aren't supposed to have. But the reality of the situation is those types of environments are so few and far between and so rare that it's almost a moot point to even discuss it, to even take it seriously. The idea of a rogue gun dealer, there's not really any way that those guns that a dealer gets in, especially from distributors and things, they go through such a distinctive process of being logged out and logged in. It's not like there's gun dealers out there that go, well, I know you can't pass a background check, so I'll tell you what, for $500 more, I'll sell you this gun off the books. There's just no such thing. You can't just say, oh, this gun I took home or disposed. There's always a paperwork trail for how guns are, the acquisition and disposition of firearms. So to say rogue gun dealer, well, what would a rogue gun dealer be? A rogue gun dealer would if there even is such a thing as a rogue gun dealer, honestly, but if there were such a thing as a rogue gun dealer, it would be something along the lines of someone who's just, let's just say, manufacturing machine guns and then selling them on the street with no paperwork. But that's not a person that's an FFL holder anyway. All right. Use the Department of Defense's acquisition of firearms to further firearm and public safety practices. The Department of Defense buys a large number of firearms and other weapons to protect and serve our country. The President is directing the Secretary of Defense to develop and implement principles to further firearms and public safety practices through Department of Defense acquisition of firearms consistent with applicable law. I honestly cannot even say I even understand what that means. So I'm not even sure what he means by that. Don't even know how to take that. President Biden is also encouraging the Independent Federal Trade Commission to issue a public report analyzing how gun manufacturers market firearms to minors and how such manufacturers market firearms to all civilians, including through the use of military imagery. That's kind of interesting, because all different types of people look at ads, right? So if you pick up a magazine, for instance, and it's got an ad of a law enforcement officer in full body armor conducting a patrol or whatever, right? It's a Smith & Wesson ad for an M&P whatever type of AR, and it's a cop in uniform, on patrol or something, or it shows it in a patrol rack in a police car, or it shows it mounted to an ATV, and there's a dude in camo out hunting, or there's a guy out on the 3-gun competition range, and they're obviously in competition, right? they're trying to paint, again, this is, I believe, incredibly unfair for them to weaponize the Federal Trade Commission against the way that guns are advertised. You can't do that. I mean, if that were the case, right, you could say, well, I sprained my ankle getting out of my truck on a farm, on a route when I got out of my Ford pickup truck, and because Ford markets their trucks to farmers, now Ford is culpable for me spraining my ankle because I bought the truck and used it for the purpose that it's meant to be used for. It's like, it's dumb, right? The end result, the firearm works as the way that it's intended to work and doesn't hurt the user and doesn't explode or accidentally, fail in some catastrophic way that hurts the end user. Well, then the firearm works as it's intended. It's not like there's some mystery about what guns do, right? Now, the question being that, can firearms be marketed to young people and minors? Absolutely they can. There are plenty of young people that use firearms on a regular basis, and it's completely normal with adult supervision, with the proper training, proper safety protocols, personal protective equipment, and every itty-bitty, minute safety detail considered on a completely safe range in a safe environment around sober people that are doing the right thing and watching after their kids and being extremely attentive. I mean, they want to paint the picture that firearms manufacturers market guns in an irresponsible way to minors, or that they market guns to people in some sort of odd militaristic sense. And while that may be true in some situations, like if you look at a Daniel Defense ad and there's a dude in full kit running a gun, surely you're led to believe or assume at least that person is law enforcement or that they are marketing that gun to law enforcement. But here's the thing, is firearms are marketed to a wide variety of different people. Many gun companies sell the exact same model of firearm that they would sell to a military or police agency to civilians, right? Like, I can buy a Daniel Defense M4A1. Now, it's going to be a semi-auto, but it's pretty much the same gun that they would sell on a military contract or a police contract. So to say that the marketing unfairly targets, let's just say, minors, or that the marketing, let's say, appears militaristic in nature, I think it's a moot point, and I don't really see them having much success on that front. Help catch shooters by accelerating federal law enforcement's reporting of ballistics data. The National Integrated Ballistics Information Network allows federal, state, and local law enforcement to match fired cartridge casings to the guns from which they were fired, making it easier for law enforcement to connect multiple crime scenes and catch shooters. Okay, well, I mean, I suppose in under the pretext of solving a murder or something like that, I mean, I don't really see how that would be necessarily a bad thing. And why isn't that something they're already doing anyway? I just don't understand like what the meaning would be to reiterate a particular protocol that's likely already in place anyway. Accelerate and intensify implementation of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the most significant gun safety legislation accomplishment in nearly 30 years. I mean, I don't understand how they can accelerate and intensify, again, a program that is already there. It's already in place. Like, it's really, when you look at these executive orders, a lot of it's lip service. You know what I mean? A lot of it becomes a situation where they're really just pandering. They're not really providing any real value or real additional type of things. They're just kind of saying, oh, well, we're directing you to look at this further or to look at it closer. But I mean, you can't force someone to do their job. That's essentially sounds to me like what you're asking people to do. It's like, oh, well, we don't feel like you're being a tyrant hard enough. You need to tyrant more. Okay, improve federal support for gun violence survivors, victims and survivors' families, first responders to gun violence, and communities affected by gun violence. When a hurricane overwhelms a community, FEMA coordinates federal, state, local, and nonprofit organizations in order to assess and meet community needs. That's a good thing. FEMA actually came to my town not long ago to assist with a tornado. Okay. However, when a mass shooting overwhelms a community, no coordinated U.S. government mechanism exists to meet short and long-term needs, such as mental health care for grief and trauma, financial assistance. For example, when a family loses the sole breadwinner, or when a small business is shut down due to a lengthy shooting investigation. Yeah, what about if a gun business is shut down because of a shooting investigation or a lawsuit? And food, for example, when the Buffalo shooting closed down the only grocery store in the neighborhood. The president is directing members of his cabinet to develop a proposal for how the federal government can better support communities after a mass shooting and identify what additional resources or authorities with the executive branch would need from Congress to implement this proposal. I mean, look, I think it's safe to say that when it comes to a terrible act being carried out and a community being horribly affected by these acts, I think it's safe to say that we all want to come together and do the best we can to help them in their grief and help them in the logistical situation of moving on with life and picking up the pieces of that tragedy and moving forward. I don't think anybody with a clear conscience would ever sit there and say that they would wish some terrible thing to happen to a group of people or that a community of people deserves some violence to be carried out against them or anything like that. So, hey, I don't really have a problem with providing additional resources to victims. I think that, we could all use a little more help in those situations. And gosh knows, when you're having a rough day, a rough time in life, sometimes a little help is good. Advanced congressional efforts to prevent the proliferation of firearms undetectable by metal detectors. In recent years, we've seen the rise of technology that allows guns to be made with polymers and other material. Look, I'm not even going to entertain this last bullet point because we all know that metal detectors, especially at airports, are so freaking good. There's no way you're slipping a gun through that dang checkpoint without them finding it. That is lip service because they don't like polymer guns. They don't like guns that can be 3D printed. That's what this all comes down to. They don't like polymer frame guns for that reason. Not because they're undetectable. It's because they're easy for someone to make on their printer at home and they don't like it. There's a lot of things that are in the weeds right now. A lot of things that are going on with all of this stuff. And it's interesting in this snapshot to get an idea of where their minds are at. Some of the bullet points you can't help but think, I could sort of understand in some ways, but as you and I all know, we're well educated at this point in their actions. We know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And while maybe their intentions might be pretty good in some cases, we all know that Pandora's box, once it's opened, you're never going to close it. And of course, you notice that the air of authoritarianism is in a lot of these statements where it's like, we see what authorities we need to grant ourselves to accomplish this measure. Well, of course they're going to say they need more authorities granted because the more power they get, the more they can put their boot down on you. And ultimately, that's really what this is all about. They want to have the ability to completely control the populace in every single way they want to. If you don't have firearms, you can't defend yourself against their bad ideas. And they know that. They probably know that what they're going to try to carry out in the next few years or maybe even the next decade or no telling how long, they know that in order for their plans to work out, that the ultimate plan in the long term is for them to disarm you. And these types of ideas are one step closer to disarming you. I think it's worth mentioning too here towards the end is that, there are some weak-kneed Republicans that, we have to watch out for. Mitch McConnell, well, he's in the hospital right now, and, there's no telling what's going to happen with that. But people like Mitch McConnell, there are a lot of them that are weak-kneed people that will totally bend the knee to gun control. There's been a lot of people that are supposed to be on the side of the Republicans that don't always, see our way, especially when it comes to background checks. And the reason that the Biden administration, rolled out this executive order and made it so centered around background checks is because there have been a lot of Republicans that have turned face a little bit and said, hey, I would support stricter background checks or some form of universal background checks. The Biden administration knows this. They're not stupid. So they know by issuing this executive order that it could potentially pressure Congress to take action and put up some form of a bill. Do I see it happening? Probably not. We've noticed that with the Biden administration here recently, they've done a 180 on a lot of different stuff. Without getting in the weeds, for instance, they just approved a couple of drilling projects. Right. What did Biden say when he ran for president? I will never approve any more drilling. No more drilling. We're going to shut down the Keystone Pipeline. What are they doing? They're approving drilling. Yeah, because they're under pressure. They need to fill the strategic reserve back up, and they need to lower oil prices before there's a crew mutiny. They know this. They're not stupid. They're playing everybody for a fiddle. They are adhering to the needs of what they view their constituents as wanting in the first few years of the presidency. And then in the last few years of the presidency, they're going to be like, oh, we're tough on crime. We're going to drill the oil. Oh, yeah, support the police. It's just complete 180, right? So that they can try to bring some of those fence sitters from the middle over to their side. I don't think it's going to work out the way they want it to. But I do worry about some of the weak-kneed Republicans that are willing to cave on gun-related issues, especially related to universal background checks, and more importantly, related to red flag confiscation orders. Right now, there's no federal red flag confiscation law that's in place, but boy, you better believe me, the Democrats want it bad. And there's like 19 states that have red flag confiscation orders in place now. It's a very scary concept. But the antithesis to that, I suppose, would be that now we have more states than ever that have constitutional carry. Right now, Florida is pretty close to getting constitutional carry passed. So I think they'll be the 32nd or 31st state or something like this. So there's quite a few states that have constitutional carry now. And when you compare that map, there's actually an interactive map where you can see the flow of constitutional carry occur throughout the last, 15 or 20 years or whatever. And it's only within, the recent decade where we've seen a huge influx of constitutional carry states, come about. So whereby, yes, you do see a chipping away of things like, red flag confiscation orders being more prevalent in some states than others. You also see, constitutional carry being more prevalent in some states more than others. So is that a balkanization of society or something like that? Or is it just the view of the times, the lay of the land? I mean, only time will tell. But we have to be engaged at the state level. We have to fight these state battles. They're super important because a lot of times what a majority of the states might do in a certain situation can affect what happens at the federal level. And it can also affect Supreme Court cases too. The Supreme Court will kind of figure on things like that. Well, if 40 states have constitutional carry, well, should we go ahead and just say that, carry permits are just completely 110% unabashed, unconstitutional in every single little way? So there's a lot of conjecture and there's a lot of nuance that goes in to these types of things. But I wanted everyone to be aware. I wanted to give some of my thoughts on it. We will do some updates as more information comes out. Is this something to worry about? Probably not, but it is a point of contention. It is something to think about. We also need to keep our eye on Cargill versus Garland. The feds have till the end of February to respond. As far as I know, I haven't seen any response in that particular lawsuit, and that's pretty damning for the feds if that is the case, because, I think they see the writing on the wall. Right now, GOA and several states are going after the brace situation, and they're suing the ATF, suing the administrative state over this. And it's just, it's going to be interesting to see how this rule of lenity idea plays out. I think they're really going just as much off the rule of lenity kind of being a springboard against Chevron deference. So we're going to see how it all shakes down and how it winds up happening. There's a lot of statutory and regulatory jargon that I'm not going to get into in this particular video. I'll probably prepare an article of my own or prepare some notes, and I'll do a separate video on that in the future on the current status of the brace situation. But just know that it's very, very likely that the GOA is going to get a stay on the brace situation, and that for the time being, probably for the immediate future, for quite some time, there's a high chance that braces won't be able to be touched or messed with by the ATF until all this shakes down in court. And if the situation with bump stocks with Cargill versus Garland is any indication, the Fifth Circuit decision and the way that shook down, if that's any indication, that should tell us most certainly that this is probably going to end up going in our way. And that probably more than likely the ATF knew from day one that it was going to go our way, but they're just trying to buy themselves some time. They're trying to provide lip service to their constituents, to their handlers, right? Ultimately, it's the Biden administration that told the ATF, hey, do this, right? And what do? They kiss the hand that feeds and they do it, right? They're just pandering to their handler. They knew probably from day one. They might have even tried to tell him, this isn't going to stick. And he's probably like licking his ice cream going, and, bud? They don't care. They want to let the courts sort it out. And right now, that's been their tactic for trying to get gun control to stick. They're throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks, and they go, throw the book at them and let the courts sort it out. And that's a terrible situation to be in when we're supposed to be a representative republic. We're supposed to be, represented. We're supposed to be able to let our voices be heard, choose our representatives, and then have them vote on laws, yay or nay, based on our interests, based on their knowledge of our interests, and for us to have representation, for Congress to pass laws. That's how this country works. If they don't like gun laws, then Congress needs to change the gun laws. And if there's not enough public support to change the gun laws through the various constituencies, well, then it's not possible. But it shouldn't be possible for a tyrant to swipe a pen and just make it so. And the executive order idea, executive action idea has been grossly abused in the last 10, 15 years. And it's been pretty terrible to see it happen. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes down. I just wanted to let you guys know that this was going on and to provide a little bit of context and hopefully, a few opinions that hopefully you agree with. If not, that's cool too. But those are my opinions. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks so much for tuning in. Many more videos on the way. We'll see you soon.